I want to bring in some analysis now from our political analysts here at CTV, Kathleen Monk, Scott Reed, and Shakir Chambers, who were watching alongside as this announcement was made by the Prime Minister. Scott, I'll start with you. What stood out to you?
A couple of things. First, when the Prime Minister turned his comments to something that was a bit more personal, a bit more family-oriented, talked about sitting his kids down last night and telling them that he wasn't going to be able to continue as Prime Minister. He was going to be taking that decision. It's a stark reminder for those of us that have worked with leaders and Prime Ministers that these people are people. And this is the kind of decision that does not come easily, and it is difficult. The second thing is the difficult spot that the party remains in. And the Prime Minister's very clearly telegraphed preference for a full and wide open leadership convention. It remains a complete puzzle to me if the party wishes to avoid a catastrophic 1993-esque outcome in this next election, how the party can afford to take 4 months to select a leader when the government may only have 2.5 months of life expectancy. How those things are reconciled, what method is going to be put in place to select a leader that's wide open and available at the same time that conforms with this, very much gun to your head calendar that the government now faces. I'll be very interested to see it. But the Prime Minister weighed in on that question, and he was definitive.
Yeah, I thought that really stood out to me as well, Shakir, because it sort of formed a backdrop for whatever happens next. And when the Prime Minister is saying, here's what should happen, that does carry, regardless of the announcement he made today, a significant amount of weight. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, as Scott pointed to, the timelines are very tight. If you're saying Parliament's coming back on March 24th, you want to have your leader in place by then. So I'm not sure how the party puts it together, but I do recall in Ontario in 2018 when Patrick Brown resigned in dramatic fashion. That campaign came together in about 2 months and Ford was selected, went into the election and won the election. So obviously different scale, different situation, but it's definitely possible. I think when I look at Justin Trudeau and what he said today in his brief press conference, I think one thing that shocked me is that the divisions in caucus aren't new. I mean, at least as early as the St. Paul's by-election, he's had calls for him to step aside. There are a lot of MPs, backbenchers MPs, who said, you know what, if you held a secret ballot, I can assure you caucus would vote you out of power. So this is not new. I'm just curious why it took so long for him to actually come to this realization. I think the second thing in these comments is just really no mention about what's coming next, Donald Trump and his tariffs. And if we do have a leadership race, based on everything that I've seen on this show and all the other articles, the potential candidates hold significant portfolios in this government, right? Whether it's finance, whether it's foreign affairs, whether it's industry. I'm not sure how you project any level of stability when some of your most senior members, some of your most important members to these negotiations moving forward are likely going to leave and challenge to become the next leader of this party.
Yeah, I don't know, Kathleen, how they avoid that, just given how many cabinet ministers, and we might find out in the coming days that they decide not to, but the speculation, and certainly they haven't put an end to that over the past number of weeks, is that some of the top ministers are essentially in the running for that.
And not only just the top ministers, but the top ministers who have to deal with the massive economic threat that we're being faced with Donald Trump's inauguration that will begin on January 20th, right? And these possible tariffs that he would put on. Ministers like Jolie, ministers like Minister Champagne, who would be, the leads in kind of dealing with some of this stuff. So it's in terms of the leadership race, I mean, we'll have to wait till this Wednesday caucus, kind of more details flow out. But I was really struck today that if I was Justin Trudeau and I had waited this long to make this decision around my own leadership, he could have taken a walk in 2023, left with a strong legacy. After Pierre Poilievre was elected in 2022, he could have said, it's time for change now. Last year, he could have done that, given someone ample time to set themselves up for the next election. But he chose today, in the middle of this crisis that we're facing, not just the affordability crisis, but the crisis that we're facing against Trump. And it really seems like he wasn't even trying to set up his party in his statement this morning for the best possible outcome. I didn't see him, fall on his sword, really apologize authentically, like say to Canadians, I understand I'm not likable. We're going to, shut this down. We're going to let somebody else deal with the crisis ahead. I didn't hear any of that from him. In fact, you mentioned this when you spoke to Omar, that, how actually he was saying, if only we had electoral reform, something that clearly he fought against as prime minister and only wanted to have a system that would benefit his party. So it was a bit of a baffling news conference this morning, but I'm struck by the fact that he had the choice of when to resign. And we've had so many examples of this past, and I'm sure we'll talk about it throughout the day. But Brian Mulroney, that 4-month window with Kim Campbell and what happened to that party. We can even look to our southern neighbors. There wasn't enough time. Joe Biden did not give Kamala Harris enough time in that election to really kind of get Americans to get to know her. Again, another 4-month window. That's what we're looking at here. Potentially a 4-month window or less, for the next Liberal leader to turn this around and possibly be an election campaign.
Yeah, and even less, right? Because of the prorogation of Parliament. Scott, Shakir, and Kathleen, thank you. We'll be checking in with you.